Good day, everyone. This the assignment that the district teacher said we should do. So I'm coming to show everyone how to solve this question. This is the question, and this is how your table should look like. Okay, so this question, this is how we go by it. Our previous lesson, we learned on how to list members of the three inputs in the truth table. So this one question, that's the assignment. So this is how we are going to go by it. Firstly, we learned on how to list our members. You use 4 by 4 for this rule. That's 4 by 4, and 2 by 2 for the second rule, and we use 1 by 1 for the third rule. That's R. So let's list the members. We started from T, so first T, second T, T, and we go F, 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 F. And this 2 by 2, so T, T, F, F, T, T, F, F. So we are on the third row. That's R. That's 1 by 1. So T, F, T, F, T, F, T, F. So we are done with this. I think this was in the question. They listed it for us. So all we have to do is list all the members here. That's all the question said. So we are finding for this. And man, the reason why I didn't write all this, you see, it's too long. So this is equal to this, and this here is equal to this. So I'll replace this by A. Now replace this by B. So in all, we get B, we get A implies B. That's what we are supposed to do here. So we start with the P and Q. This symbol means and. So P and Q. What this means is if P is true, then Q has to be true. That's what this means. If P is true, then Q has to be true. So we put in true. So both are true, so we put in true. True. So here, they are both true. So put in true. Here's true, here's false. So we put in F because one is false. Here too the same. And here too we have F and we have T. So only one is true. So this is false. So we put in false. This false. This false. Because we have both row to be false. So FF false. And these two the same thing. So we are, let's skip this part and go here. We will do all, so let's skip this part and continue from here. So this symbol R and the dash means R negative. This means the same as this. So this is equal to this. So if you see this, something like B is equal to B, this, the same thing, nothing changes. So opposite of R here, this R members, so opposite of R, if you see R to be true, the opposite will be false. So you put in F, that's false. If you see R to be false, opposite will be true. If you see R to be true, opposite will be false. So let's start. Let's turn it. So true, false, false, true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false, true. The same implies to this opposite of P, these P members. So true, you put in false, true, false, true. We have 4 true, so we put in false, false, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So definitely will be the opposite 4. So we have F, 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 F. So we have 4F in the row. So here opposite will be 4 T's in a row. So T, 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 T. So we are here. That's opposite of Q. So the opposite of Q is Q. So you see, we go by 2, 2, 2, 2 by 2. So in a row we have 2, true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. So get the opposite. That start from false, false, then false, false. So true, 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 false, 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 false. So true, true. So we are done with this. We are here. So we should get this, that's opposite of P or opposite of Q. This symbol is O. O. That's this symbol. So opposite of P or opposite of Q. This means opposite of P have to be true or opposite of Q have to be true. That's what this means. So this is the opposite of P and this is the opposite of Q. So each of them, one has to be true. So you put in true. So when we check here, from here, we don't have any true. We don't have any true. We have true here, so true. We have true here, so true. We have true here, so true. We have true here. We have true here. And we have true here. So here will be false, false. And let's come here. We are back to this side. So this means P and Q implies R. So even if both of these have the same answer, either true or false, so if here, that's this part, if it is true, and R, if it is true, put in true. If it is false, if R is false, at the same time this is false, you put in true. Only if this part is true and this part is false. So listen carefully. This is where the trick is. If P and Q is false and Q is true, you put in true because this implies this. So we are focusing on R. So even if this part is false and this part is true, put in true. But if this part is true and this part is false, you put in false because we are focusing on this R. So if R is true and P and Q is false, put in true. If R is false and P and Q is true, put in false. But if two of them have the same option, that's true or false, so that one you put in true. So here R and P and Q both have true, so we put in true. So here we have F for R and T for P and Q. So here this part is false, so we put in false. At the moment you see this part is false, put in false because we are focusing on R. This implies this. So R is true, so put in true. False, false. So even if both have the same option, that's false, false, or true, true, you put in true. So here you put in true. Here R is true, so you put in true. False, false, put in true. True, false, you put in true because R is true here, and here you put in true. So only false will be the second line. So let's come here. This also the same as this. This is the same as this, but we will use negative R or not R implies not P or not Q. That's here and here. We use this option and this option. Okay, so we are here. Here I said this part is the same as this part. But this part we will use the members here. We use negative R or not R and not P or not Q. So not R implies bracket not P or not Q. So we first look, even if this means even if this part is true and this part is true, you put in true. Even if this part is false and this part is false, you put in true. And if this part is true and this part is false, you put in true. because we are focusing on this part, because not R implies this. But you put in false when R is even true and implies this part to be false. So when R is true and this part is false, put in false, because we are focusing on this part. So if this part is false, put in false. That's what this means. So let's cross and check on our options in the table. So not R, that this is false, and this, that is false, so we put in true. T is true, here's false. So here's where the trick is. T is true, here's false. So this implies this, but this is false, so we put in false, because we want this to be true. This is false, this true, this true, so put in true. This true, put in true. This false, this true, put in true. This true, put in true. This false, true, put in true, then true. So we are left with the final answer. That's the main question. The main question, the answer for this. So I already said I will replace this part with A and this part with B. So this part is here and this part is here. So I'll place this long part with B and this long part with A. So this implies sign, make the difference. So make sure you bring it. So this A implies B, A implies B. That's what I've done here. A implies B. So the same thing to, so you can choose to write this or you can choose to write this. So what this means is this part is supposed to be true always, and this part can be false or true. Even if both are false, you put in true. Even both are true, you put in true. You put in false only if this part is false. So let's start this and this. So we see true here and we see true here, both are true, so put in true. False, false, put in true. True, true, 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 put in true. Then true, true, also true, true, put in true. So we are done. We are done with our box or our table. So this is how the assignment is supposed to be. So after finding your final answer, this proves that this whole equation is tautology. So the question is, prove that this is tautology. So you can see all is true. So this is tautology. So this proves that this is tautology. Or if you find it difficult in answering this question, just DM me. And also let's try to answer the questions under this table in the handout. See if from this table you go to some questions. So let's try and answer them with the table.